This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. In the late 1800s, Butch Cassidy and his wild bunch frequently rode through Brown's Hole, a rugged hideout straddling the borders of Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming, in pursuit of their own kind of treasure. Yet, without realizing it, they passed through a narrow, towering canyon that concealed more wealth beneath their horses' hooves than they would ever see in their lifetimes. Had Butch and his gang known about this hidden fortune, and if they had been willing to trade their guns for shovels, they might have abandoned their outlaw ways and lived lives of luxury, free from the constant pursuit of the law. Though the notorious bandits have long since ridden out of history, the incredibly rich mine they overlooked remains. Once hailed by geologists as one of the richest copper strikes ever found, the mine has remained lost and untouched for over a century. The man who discovered this treasure was Jesse Ewing, an Englishman with a reputation as one of the meanest, toughest figures the Wild West ever produced. His story is one of relentless determination, hard labor, and ruthless violence. Ewing was known for paying his hired workers not with wages, but with threats, and when necessary, his deadly knife. Those who resisted often met a grim fate. Ewing had honed his mining skills in the gold fields of South Pass and Atlantic City before joining an expedition led by a prospector named H.M. Hook in 1868. That summer, they set out from Green River City, navigating the wild, untamed waters of the Green River, hoping to explore the nearly inaccessible canyon walls for valuable ore. But disaster struck. Their crude raft was smashed in the rapids, and Hook drowned. The remaining men barely managed to escape, eventually reaching Brown's Hole. While the rest of the party trudged back to Green River City, Ewing chose to stay, drawn to the rugged land. It was in the upper end of Red Creek Canyon that Ewing discovered a promising copper vein. Determined to work the claim, he built a cabin and began tunneling into the mountainside. The Wild Bunch and other locals soon came to know the area as Jesse Ewing Canyon, a name it still carries today. J.S. Hoy, a contemporary who knew Ewing personally, later wrote of him, "He was a relentless worker. Over time, he carved a tunnel nearly 500 feet into the mountain, convinced that he was on the verge of reaching a rich copper deposit. To speed up his excavation, Ewing recruited men to help him. But when their labor and patience ran dry, he repaid them not with money, but by running them off at knife point. Some resisted, and the silent graves scattered through the canyon and along the Green River serve as grim reminders of their fate." Despite the bloodshed, Ewing's mine was making progress. His tunnel eventually stretched 1,500 feet into the mountain, and his ore samples grew increasingly richer. Convinced that he was on the verge of striking an enormous lode, he worked tirelessly until the vein suddenly vanished. Certain that he had accidentally bypassed the main deposit, Ewing confided in his friend, John Jarvie, a rancher at the foot of the canyon. He believed that by digging a vertical shaft he could relocate the lost vein. But Ewing had another concern: a young prospector named Robinson, who had set up camp beneath the House Rock, a well-known square landmark on the canyon's west wall. Ewing was convinced that Robinson was spying on him with field glasses. One midwinter day, the dispute came to a brutal end. Ewing encountered Robinson and left his bloody corpse frozen on the ice of the Green River. Ironically, Ewing would later be buried near Robinson's grave. Alongside his mining efforts, Ewing also raised fine horses, selling them to the Wild Bunch and other outlaw gangs that passed through Brown's Hole. The profits from these sales fueled his relentless search for the lost copper vein. However, his aggressive nature once again led to conflict. He carelessly allowed his horses to graze on rangeland claimed by a young gunfighter named Cleophas J. Dowd. Unwilling to tolerate the trespass, Dowd retaliated by driving Ewing's prized horses off a cliff and into the Green River. Ewing's story is one of both incredible ambition and ruthless violence, but his greatest legacy, the fabulously rich mine he discovered and then lost, remains hidden, waiting to be found. Jesse Ewing's ruthless ways finally caught up with him when he clashed with Cleophas J. Dowd. After Dowd drove Ewing's horses off a cliff into the Green River, Ewing retaliated with his deadly 10-inch knife. But Dowd, quick on the draw, shot Ewing in the groin and left him for dead. Fortunately for Ewing, his old friend John Jarvie found him and nursed him back to health. Undeterred by his injuries, Ewing resumed his relentless search for the lost copper vein. Around 1885, he confided in Pick Murdoch, an experienced Indian prospector from the Winta Ure Reservation, that he had finally struck the rich deposit. He handed Murdoch samples of the ore, which were promptly sent to a Denver assay office for analysis. While awaiting the results, Ewing revealed the mine's location to Murdoch. Based on Murdoch's later accounts, the vein was situated near the head of Jesse Ewing Canyon, along the west wall. Ewing estimated that he would need to dig a vertical shaft about 50 feet down, then tunnel another 150 feet horizontally to reach the main deposit. But Ewing never lived to see his fortune. In his final scheme, he took on a much younger man named Duncan as a partner, fully intending to exploit his labor and then drive him off as he had done to so many others. However, Duncan proved to be a different kind of adversary. One day, feigning illness, he stayed behind at the cabin while Ewing went out to work the shaft. At the time, Ewing had acquired a coupon woman named Madame Forrestal, and he suspected Duncan had ulterior motives regarding her. Growing suspicious, Ewing decided to double back to the cabin to spy on them. But Madame may have tipped Duncan off, because as Ewing made his way down the trail, Duncan was waiting for him. With a single close-range shot to the neck, Duncan killed Ewing, decapitating him on the spot. Duncan and Madame Forrestal disappeared without a trace, while John Jarvie ensured Ewing received a proper burial near the Green River. With Ewing's death, the secret of the copper bonanza rested with just one man, Pick Murdoch, but even he only had a rough idea of its location. When the assay report from Denver finally arrived, it revealed that the ore was among the richest copper ever tested. At the time, Murdoch was preoccupied with another copper claim in the Uinta Mountains, which he later sold to Lewis Dyer. This site, known as the Dyer Mine, went on to produce millions of dollars in copper from 1890 to 1900. Because of this, Murdoch delayed his search for Ewing's lost vein. But others weren't willing to wait. Local newspapers sensationalized the story, sparking a rush of prospectors into Jesse Ewing Canyon. Old shafts were reopened, new tunnels were dug, and fortunes were gambled in the hunt for the legendary mine. Yet no one struck it rich, and many lost everything in the futile search. One man who came close was Matt Warner, a former outlaw from Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, who had turned his attention to ranching and prospecting. Warner had known Ewing personally, and always believed the old prospector was destined for a major strike. Determined to find it himself, he searched around Ewing's old cabins, scouring the canyon walls for signs of the lost vein. From a high vantage point, Warner spotted a gray-colored streak running down the mountainside, seemingly leading to one of Ewing's cabins. Following the vein, he made an astonishing discovery: a hidden trapdoor concealing a vertical shaft. Convinced he had found Ewing's lost mine, Warner hurried back to Vernal, Utah, where he persuaded Sheriff John T. Pope, Charles E. Carroll, and a few others to join him in working the site. On April 23, 1896, the Vernal Express reported, John Pope, C. E. Carroll, and several others left Vernal Wednesday on a prospecting trip. None of the party would divulge the secret of their destination, but it was hinted that Matt Warner had made a real find and was taking them with him to reveal the location. Upon arriving at Brown's Hole, the group immediately set to work, clearing out the shaft's debris. After days of labor, they finally brought some ore to the surface. But to their astonishment, it wasn't copper, it was gold. Excited, the men rushed back to Vernal to have the ore assayed. The results confirmed that the rock contained gold valued between $38 and $550 per ton, and there appeared to be plenty of it. Had Warner stumbled upon an even greater treasure than the one Ewing had sought? Or was this yet another lost fortune waiting to be uncovered? The mystery of Jesse Ewing's mine remains unsolved. It seemed that Matt Warner was finally poised to make his fortune, this time not with a gun, but with a spade. However, fate had other plans. In June of that same year, he became involved in a gunfight and was sentenced to prison. His old friend Butch Cassidy offered to break him out by force, but Warner refused the offer. Meanwhile, Sheriff John Pope and Charles Carroll continued to work the promising vein Warner had uncovered. But just as Jesse Ewing had once experienced with his copper strike, the ore deposit eventually ran out. Convinced that the vein was still hidden somewhere nearby, Carroll persisted in the search for a while, but eventually, he turned his attention back to making a living. He was killed not long after, leaving the mystery of the lost copper mine once again in the hands of a single man, Pick Murdoch. Murdoch, already renowned for his discoveries of the famous Silver King mine in Park City and the lucrative Dyer mine, was determined to solve the mystery of Jesse Ewing's lost vein. In the fall of 1906, he returned to Vernal, Utah in a state of great excitement, proclaiming that he had finally rediscovered the hidden deposit. "This is the richest copper ore I've ever seen," he told his associates. "I'd bet $1 million that prospectors have walked right over it without realizing what was beneath their feet. It's hidden in the last place you'd ever expect to look, and I barely had to dig before I hit it. But I won't say any more until I get my assay report back." The anticipation grew as Murdoch sent his ore samples to an assay office in Denver. However, in those days, mail traveled slowly, and the wait was long. Finally, the report arrived at the small post office in White Rocks, on the Winta Ure Reservation, where Murdoch lived. The postman, recognizing the significance of the letter, rushed to deliver it to Murdoch in person. But fate had moved faster than the postman. By the time the letter arrived, Pick Murdoch was dead. Murdoch never saw the results of his assay report, which confirmed the staggering value of his discovery, between $1,500 and $5,000 per ton. News of the find reached the powerful Kennecott Copper Corporation, which quickly sent a team of investigators to examine the ore samples, verify the assay results, and assess the potential of the site. After conducting their own tests, they estimated the lost mine's worth, depending on its actual volume, at somewhere between $3 million and $15 million. But there was one problem. The mine was still lost. Despite the combined efforts of some of the world's most skilled geologists and copper producers, the mysterious deposit continued to elude all who searched for it. Today, travelers passing through Brown's Hole unknowingly ride through history, much like Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch once did. Few realize that beneath their feet may lie a fortune beyond their wildest dreams. Jesse Ewing's old cabin still stands, a lonely and weathered relic at the crest of the canyon. His grave, along with the many prospect holes scattered throughout the landscape, serves as a silent monument to the Herculean efforts and brutal violence that once unfolded here. The canyon holds its secrets well. Until the Lost Ewing Mine is found again, its legend will remain, a whisper carried on the wind through the lonely Utah hills. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.